Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Podcast by Army podcast, where we talk about BTS, Army, fandom, and research. We are your co-hosts, Dr. Kate Ringland and
Jhertau Her, a university researcher. And I wonder what today's episode is about.
I also wonder.
I do wonder. If you couldn't already tell from the title of this episode, today we're after many months, which we will address, we are talking about the issues happening in Palestine. No, I'll say it outright. The genocide happening in Palestine and the atrocities that the Palestinian people are facing. And we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it in relation to Army. We're going to talk about it in relation to our own lives as university researchers and just personally as people living in America as well. Because our tax dollars getting used to pay for it.
Yep.
Okay. So what's happening in Palestine? I said genocide, which many people may think is a loaded word, but it's true. It is genocide. Many people think it started on October 7th with the kidnapping of hostages, but the issues in Palestine are very historically deep and have been happening even before I was born. Keep in mind, I was born in 2004. And the issues in Palestine started like 1940s.
We should put a disclaimer up front that if you want to know more about this, you should go talk to actual Palestinians and read what actual Palestinians have been writing. There's a lot of literature, there's a lot of videos, there's a lot of actual better than us references and content to this larger issue, and we're just going to try to give our best highlights so that people have context for this podcast.
Yes. So in the 1940s, after World War II, America, US, it decided to start Israel in the Middle East, near where Jerusalem is. So formerly this land was known as Palestine. It still is Palestine, but this became the state of Israel. And the state of Israel essentially is a settler colonist state. So what does that mean? That means that people who did not live there before move to that area and then displace the people that did live there, so that way they can live there instead. So with Palestine, it happens very literally, quite often, where like Palestinians, they're literally kicked out of their homes. And then people from around the world who are of Jewish descent or who might identify as Jewish, they go in and then they take over the Palestinians' homes. Now, with this whole conversation, very much point blank, no anti-Semitism here. We do not support it. Do not come in and try to be anti-Semitic and use our words to be anti-Semitic. Okay? The state of Israel itself is harmful to Jewish people. Because you want to know the reason why Israel was created as a state is because other places in the world did not want to take Jewish refugees during and after World War II because of anti-Semitism. So then Israel as a settler colonist state was created so that way Jewish people could go there. So instead of the world opening its arms up to Jewish people and accepting Jewish people into their countries, into different places, they decided to continue doing the most anti-Semitic thing you could, which is completely other Jewish people, and put them in just a completely different place, and also displacing people at the same time. So Israel inherently itself, as like a settler colonist state, is anti-Semitic. Its existence is anti-Semitic, and it's a representation of the anti-Semitism that existed like before, during, and after World War II, and then that still exists today, and how people don't want to accept Jewish people into their communities. With this displacement, now there's been decades of tension and violence towards Palestinians. And a lot of times in Palestinians, as people, they have retaliated against this violence, because if someone's hurting you, you don't want to keep hurting. So you retaliate. And that's what happens. And a lot of times, I just need to touch on this really quickly because recently this happened with Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday and also Black History Month is coming up. But a lot of people, when they see acts of resistance, like violent acts of resistance, they think, oh, that's not how Martin Luther King Jr. would do it. That's not how you're supposed to resist and act. And here's the thing Martin Luther King Jr. has his beliefs and who he was as a person have essentially been created into myth. So that way, white supremacy and white supremacists and people who uphold white supremacy basically can use his image and also his out of context words so that way they can continue oppressing people. So don't ever come on here and try to say that resistance against oppression has to only be peaceful because violent resistance is also essential to making change. That's basically a very brief history of what's happened in that area. Kate, do you want to add some other things?
I think maybe I'll just add that we'll drop some links and things in the episode description and on Twitter and stuff so that if you want to know more, there's lots of good resources out there for you to learn more.
Yes, very much. I encourage everyone who listens to this episode to take this as a learning opportunity more than anything. If you don't know a lot about what's happening and you're concerned about what's happening, then it's good to seek out resources
Yeah,
and
it's good. Yeah.
learn.
Yeah. And there's people have done the labor for you and put it together. So it's out there for you to consume. And not just on Twitter. Like there are books, any media format you want, the information is there for you to have. There was a list, I think that was this morning going around, that had a great Google Doc that had books, research articles, like published research articles, and then video documentaries. So it had a little bit of everything. And there was some poetry in there. There was some really nice stuff, like from Palestinians about Palestine. So yeah, I definitely recommend checking that stuff out. We can drop a link to that in the description.
Yes, we'll be sure to do that. Now, with me all saying this, I would like to preface as well, I am not a critical race and ethnic studies researcher. I am not an individual who has done research in the field about Palestine. I am coming from an educated standpoint as someone who has read a lot and watched a lot about Palestine. So just prefacing all of that. I'm not a voice of authority, essentially.
Yeah, same.
About the topic.
And I also want to say that I feel like I'm approaching this more from a human, let's be good humans together point of view. And I, as an educated person who literally teaches people how to learn for a living, this is me encouraging all of the listeners to go seek their own information and not just take it from us. But if this is a starting point for you, then to be truly a starting point to go seek voices from people who are actually impacted by this.
Yes, very much we encourage that. Now, with talking with that, and this whole situation happening in Palestine, let me clarify the genocide happening in Palestine. Where do we stand, basically, with this whole issue? And like what Kate was talking about, like it's human to human. Like, end the genocide. Call for ceasefire. We want the liberation, the complete and total liberation of Palestine and dismantlement of the Israel state.
Yeah. And I like, honestly, as a citizen of the United States, I would like our government to stop its nonsense and paying for things like genocide.
Yes. Take in mind, both Kate and I were both US citizens and we both pay taxes because we both work jobs. And that a lot of that tax money goes towards the US military, which is the most funded military in the entire world. And it goes to buying drones, it goes to buying weapons, it goes to training soldiers, and those soldiers contribute to genocide.
Yeah.
And it's disheartening as US citizens that you don't get to control where your tax money goes, basically. Of course, there's things like legislation and advocating for different tax laws, but there's a lot of times where we don't get to decide that. And it's disheartening to know that our money gets taken to do those types of things.
Yeah, I mean, our decision-making power comes with who we're voting into office, and that's a whole other larger conversation. But right now, we basically are just voting between bad choices. And so, what I'm sensing and what I'm feeling is just a lot of frustration as a voter about basically not having a decision and basically supporting an occupation and genocide of another country.
Yeah. I'd also like to transition into talking about how Kate and I, as individuals, are both involved, like with things surrounding Palestine IRL. Like, for me personally, like I'm involved in student government. I'm a student at UC Santa Cruz, which is a school that donates money to weapons manufacturers and also gets money from weapons manufacturers to build nice buildings and then have a pipeline basically of students who then turn into workers for those weapons manufacturers. And it's like the complete and total like infringement on a place of learning and knowledge and then using that to conduct violence. And it's just we can talk about this. Kate and I both work in the department that basically creates this pipeline
Yeah.
and upholds this pipeline. And just like articulating it right now, when you talk through it, when you think about it, it's truly so despicable how they use like these young people who are just coming up in the world, who are just learning about the world. And then they use their knowledge and their talents to conduct violence, to create weapons, and then to continue oppressing people around the world.
Yeah.
And I think that's a connection a lot of people don't making. What do you think about it, Kate?
Yeah, it's just a larger part of working at a public university that is publicly funded in the United States, where it's all tied together. And a lot of folks, I don't know the numbers, like I'd have to go look it up and I'm not going to, but a lot of folks were sitting in engineering. So a lot of folks are getting money from places like the Department of Defense. And that's how we fund the research, and not by we I mean us, the larger engineering institute. I don't get DoD funding personally, but it's there and it's helping keep the lights on in our buildings. And I think it's worth acknowledging that we as individuals, we are benefiting from these systems by being here in this space. And so partly us doing this podcast is a little bit of our active resistance against that.
Yes. There's many acts of resistance happening with just us talking about this. I guess we'll just talk about it. Basically, with the UC campus going to a public university, just living in America right now, like we are
Yeah.
undergoing a lot of censorship. I guess I'll talk about student government really quick before you delve into the hellhole that is faculty. But as a student, we've gotten one all school email about Palestine, and they called it the Israel-Hamas war. Whatever. Okay. Who helped you make that announcement? My goodness. But like we've gotten one email as a university about it, nothing after that. And then we also, whenever there was a student demonstration, there would be an email about that.
Yeah.
So you can clearly see what they care about. They care about upkeeping a certain status quo. They care about making it look like nothing wrong is happening, when clearly you can see the school and how the school itself, if the school is a living, breathing body, it is so sick and tired, and it's basically getting destroyed because the students themselves are in disarray. There's so many of my professors who just have never acknowledged the fact that this is happening in the news, this is happening in the world, and how that affects students. And they just send us to what it's counseling and psychological services, and
Yep.
and that's an underfunded department in itself. Can't even help anyone talk about it. And a lot of times when you try to talk about it, they censor you anyway, and they tell you not to talk about it. So yeah, that's like the aspect of it with when it comes to being a student. For me, also, I'm also a student government representative. And I've gotten the emails, I've gotten the warnings from people that I shouldn't talk about it so publicly. My student government, actually, because on UC Santa Cruz, there were actually multiple living areas within the university. So in my living area, it's called like a college, but it's like more like a living area and like community area. And in my college, we were the first college to very publicly stand with Palestine and to call on students within our college to join resistance movements like protests. And even us doing that was a lot. I didn't get pushback from the other people in my student government itself, but I did get pushback from higher entities who don't want us saying stuff like that because technically it is still the university itself. It's hard right now. It's really tough, but here we are. What about you, Kate?
Yeah, so I'm gonna gloss. I'm not gonna give too many details here, but the general vibe is that as faculty, that this has never been made explicit. This is all implicit and between the lines of emails and things that we have received. But the general vibe is to not talk about this. And there's been a lot of euphemisms around creating an inclusive classroom and supporting students and making sure there's uninterrupted learning. There's a lot of code words floating around, but a lot of it has just left either those of us in positions where we'd like to be able to speak out, uncertain as to the repercussions of speaking out, or we have felt like outright, like truly worried about our jobs. So, anyway, so here I am. Doing it anyway. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting baggage that comes with being a faculty, some of which we might dig into later in this episode. But some of that is, there's a lot of supposed. Now, obviously, this has some caveats attached to it, but there's like a supposed amount of academic freedom in terms of being able to say what I want to say and have opinions on what I have opinions on and give intellectual responses to things and to be able to have different perspectives, etc. That's an important part of being able to do research. It's an important part about creating a robust academic, rigorous, scientific, scholarly, whatever you want to call it, robust experience. I think that that's an important part of delivering education to students is having a diverse set of perspectives and experiences. And so what is the norm and what is enforced is that academics then in their positions have quite a lot of freedom to say what they need to say and be able to say it in this space where they're not going to be censored. It has not felt like that with this. And so I have personally been quite careful in how much I say with individuals and how much I post about things and what things I'm retweeting or whatever. I mostly have been really quiet on it. And this is largely due to me being concerned about the different ways this could impact me in my job and therefore my family's livelihood and so on. Anyway, so that's like the background of here we are. And I'm probably going to have professor friends who listen to this afterwards and message me and tell me that I'm being really dumb. But that's fine. Here we are. We're just rolling with it. So we'll just keep going.
Honestly, that's what a lot of people in my life have told me. But I feel like if I don't say anything now, I will deeply regret it in the future. Okay, first off, I feel like we need to contextualize some things about UC Santa Cruz for people to truly understand where we're coming from. Critical race and ethnic studies is very significant on our campus. And our college, our university, critical race and ethnic studies, it's an actual major. And there's a lot of students who come to Santa Cruz to take this major and to actually participate in the critical race and ethnic studies department. Okay, freshman year of my time at UC Santa Cruz, I lived in a building named after Angela Davis, the activist, and she actually teaches at UC Santa Cruz. Angela Davis. Yes, she's not dead. It hasn't been 50 bajillion years since she first started being an activist. She's still living her life and doing what she does and exists as a person and is alive, by the way. There's too many people out there who think she's dead or that she was alive 50 bajillion years ago. Okay. I know I was born in 2004, but also she's alive. Okay, we need to stop acting like she's somehow gone or she's of a bygone era, in my opinion. Anyway, but yeah, but basically, UC Santa Cruz prides itself on being like a home for social justice and activism and critical race and ethnic studies and being so outspoken and caring so much about different things in the world and being like progressive. Like Santa Cruz in itself, it is one of the most sustainable campuses in all of the US. And our sustainability goals are basically 5 years ahead of every other UC campus. That's something Santa Cruz prides itself on. And there's so many things where it's, oh, Santa Cruz is so cool, it's so hip, it's so social justice-y, activist-y. But then you get faced with things like this and like what Kate is
Yeah.
experiencing,
Yeah.
which is intimidation and actually super duper counter intuitive to what a place of learning and what academia should be. We're gonna say it. We're gonna say it. Yeah. And with this episode, we'd also like to talk about how this week, right now, it's Strike Week, which was called on the Palestinian journalist Bisan on her Instagram Live. So this week basically is about striking so that way there's like less consumerism, there's economic downfall, and there's a big effect on the global economy. So what are we striking basically and boycotting? We're boycotting things on the BDS list. If you don't know the BDS movement, it has a big boycott list for brands that directly support Israel or indirectly support Israel in some type of way. And we're following stuff like that. But also fandoms. I'll talk about this. Fandoms online and just a lot of people in different communities have started to talk about Palestine in their own communities this week. There's been a complete and total change in how people are using social media. Because the aim this week is to use all of your social media and all the platforms you have to talk about Palestine and to strike in the sense like striking and like taking away your labor and not giving your labor to people and not giving your time to people, like the capitalist systems, and ensuring that we put focus on Palestine this week. And with that, there's armies doing that too. There's also a lot of other fandoms. And I just want to highlight really quickly what they're doing before we jump into what Army's been doing, because I feel like we're going to get into it, but Army itself is having a lot of discourse and a lot of disarray about supporting Palestine. A lot of times armies don't see what's happening in other fandoms, so I think that everyone in their space is like not supporting Palestine, or there's weird things because armies themselves don't have a lot of perspective on what other fandoms are doing. And I'm not talking about like other K-pop fandoms. Of course, other K-pop fandoms are doing stuff, but I'm talking about Minecraft YouTuber fandoms or Twitch streamer fandoms or fandoms for like books, for movies, video games, TV shows, like what those fandoms are doing. And there's a lot of fandoms right now organizing, and it's called a content creator fandom. So that's a YouTuber, live streamer, Instagram influencer, TikToker, whatever. And there's a lot of fandoms, content creators right now organizing and asking content creators to speak out and to do things to support Palestine. Like, I really want to highlight really quickly Little Simsy. So she's a Twitch live streamer that live streams this game called The Sims. And she's one of the biggest Twitch live streamers for The Sims. And I believe she raised around $50,000 in support of Palestine to donate. And it's like stuff like that. Like a lot of times armies don't see stuff like that and how other communities are supporting Palestine and other fandoms are supporting Palestine and also boycotting their own things. Like I see Genshin Impact people boycotting buying stuff on Genshin, and I'm seeing like people on like people who watch Twitch, they're canceling their subscriptions for the month. There's stuff like that that genuinely everyone in every facet of their lives is doing something to stand in support of Palestine. And that's the whole point of the strike week. How are you feeling, Kate?
I think there's an interesting point to be made about the way in which our communities now are built and function, especially around fandoms and stuff, is that we are in our own little bubble and we don't see what's going on outside. And I'll say that it's been really an experience for me spending time in like my little army bubble, but then like my army bubble is literally the only place for me that is actually because I mostly just do army and go to work. So like it's literally the only place where I'm hearing anything about Palestine. So it's an interesting thing to think about is we don't necessarily have visibility into what's going on to these other communities unless we actively went and looked for it. And obviously most people aren't going to do that. They're going to stick in their own bubbles. And so I think that is an interesting byproduct of the times and the way that we socialize and spend our time. Anyway, that was just a side note.
Yeah. The internet itself right now, this is a whole other conversation. The internet
Yeah.
itself right now is not designed to bring people together. It is really bad out there. And I just want to bring up what other communities are doing and for people to seek out what other communities are doing. So I feel like sometimes armies, we're so stuck in our own bubble. And there's a lot of people who think, oh, standing up for Palestine is useless. Boycotting is useless. It's not going to do anything. And it's no.
I find that response so fascinating. Do people truly believe that, or are they just saying that because they don't want to be inconvenienced? That's a genuine question because I'm like, we live in late stage capitalism. Capitalism is literally our only tool right now. It's all we've got. So we should use it.
We see boycotting is effective already. Like we see things like McDonald's and Starbucks, like they're sweating right
Yeah.
now. They're putting out deals, they're bringing stuff back, and they're grasping at straws, trying to get people to come back and buy. But these boycotts, they're so significant and they're meaningful and they're supposed to say something and they're supposed to say something as a collective. I guess we'll start to get into it with Army specifically. But for Army, there have been multiple times in the past that people have tried boycotting. I used to be someone who very much was like, I am never boycotting BTS.
Mm-hmm.
You could not convince me to boycott BTS because let's be honest here. A lot of times when people called for a boycott in some type of fashion, a lot of times there were ulterior motives to that
Yeah.
that were not genuine and were not coming from a good place. So that way the boycott would be effective and it would actually say something as a community. But now I'm all pro boycott. We're boycotting everything. Get Scooter Braun out of there.
Oh, that
Anyway,
would be the dream. Yes.
I guess before we start getting into Army and how Army is responding to Palestine, I would really like to highlight first off Army for Palestine on Twitter.
Yeah.
They're an account that does a lot of Palestine focused events and campaigning and resources and education. There's also Learn to Liberate. In their bio, they say documenting and sharing history, culture, and art to resist colonial erasure. They're another group on Twitter that's made up of armies who are sharing a lot of resources and organizing to raise funds for Palestinians who are actually on the ground in Palestine. And these two accounts are doing a lot of great work. And if you can spare a couple of dollars to donate a couple of dollars to their campaigns or to support them through retweeting and following and just engaging with what they're talking about. Because they also do things like emails and they give you email documents that you can then take and make your own and then send off to things like Hybe or to your representatives. We're going to check them out. Please check them out. And Kate, is there anything else you would like to highlight with how armies are organizing for Palestine?
I'll say that I've been really impressed with the amount of information and the ways in which people have really mobilized. I'll point to the people who are doing good work on that front and getting the word out and not just it's not just drama in the like biggest sense of the word, right? There's like actual information that people are disseminating and people giving space to the Palestinian armies, for example. And I know we're going to get into it here in a minute, but I want to acknowledge that there have been a lot of army out there doing really good work and sticking to being informative and not getting hysterical and not falling into the trap of like turning people off of wanting to learn more and stuff. So I have seen a lot of that and I just want to give a big shout out to all those folks who have been and people doing all the labor putting threads together and stuff and creating spaces for people to like actually learn something. And so I just want to shout out to them for that.
Yeah. I would also like to say, like with things like witch hunting and the performative nature many people are
Mhm.
engaging with when it comes to Palestine. There's a lot of things going on and we don't condone it. And I would really like it, like if you walk into this podcast to be ready to have a conversation and to be ready to talk about different things with other armies. Well, first, we're saying armies here because that's just the space we are in right now,
Yeah.
but also talking about it with your friends, your family, people. I've started very openly talking about it with like our research lab.
Yeah.
And also, I'm talking about it like in class with people. So, oh, did you see the recent news about blah, blah, blah? And they're like, oh, yeah. But that helps. That
Yeah, it
helps.
creates a space for it. It creates a space for it.
Yeah. Because I remember last year, especially, it felt so isolating that this was happening and no one was talking about it. And it was just, it felt like I was like drowning. Like during winter break, when like I didn't see anyone, I was like at my hometown, and I come from a very conservative part of California, which is like crazy for people because they're like a conservative part of California, but California is all blue.
Oh, there is a big swath of conservative California, let me tell you.
Yeah, there are more Republican voters in California than in Texas. It's my favorite fact to share with people because people are always like, oh, like everyone in the South is bad and horrible and terrible. And that's not acknowledging the queer people that live there, the
Yeah.
POC that live there, the actual indigenous people that live there.
Yeah.
That doesn't include the fact that a lot of Black people historically have lived in the South because of slavery.
Yeah.
It's important to dismantle those types of ideas. There are people everywhere with different ideas, okay? Thank you. But yeah, I felt very isolated during that time. So being able to talk about it now is really important to me. Being able to talk about it openly with other people is also very important with me.
And I
So
feel like
yes.
there's community-wide gaslighting of, am I the only one bothered by this? Because nobody's saying anything. And I'm like, are we really not gonna have these conversations? And I like, for me, I don't know what the safe spaces are for me to talk about these things in. So I'm making myself a safe space right here.
There's also things like you went to an entire conference and they didn't say anything about it.
It's true. Yeah, I went to two conferences in October. In October, when things were really going down, it had literally just happened. The whole hostage thing had just happened. Not a word from anyone. Nothing.
That just goes to show how deep like Zionism runs and how deep things like the military industrial complex that we'll get into later, how deep all of that runs and how many people are in the pockets of other people.
Yeah.
It's truly disheartening. But let's round it back to Army and talking about Army in this space because that's the focus of this section. I would really like to touch on the strike against the four that's been trending this week. And hopefully this episode comes out soon whenever I figure that out. But basically, a strike against the four is a strike against the big four companies. So that includes SM, JYP, YG Entertainment, and Hybe. Now, here's the thing. I don't personally agree with the term Big Four. I don't care about it. I think the term Big Three itself has a lot of connotations behind it with actual media suppression and control of the media and media manipulation. And Big Four, Hybe is not included with that because Hybe is like an offshoot of Big Hit. It's a whole thing. But for the purposes of the strike against the four movement and what people are talking about there, I agree in a lot of the movement and the intentions of the people behind it to talk about not consuming and standing in the lines of the strike week or like the boycott that Bisan, the Palestinian journalist, called for of
Mhm.
not consuming and making sure that all of social media and all the social media that you are using right now is going directly towards the effort of supporting Palestinian people. That's what the strike against the four is supposed to be about. It's supposed to be about standing in solidarity with Palestine. We're not streaming this week, and we're not tweeting about our MVs, we're not tweeting about new releases, we're not liking endorsements that the K-pop groups are doing, and we're not sharing stuff like that because we're all focusing on Palestine.
Yeah.
That's supposed to be the goal. And other people don't understand that because First off, the strike against the four, very much when it was first started and people first started circulating it, it was very rushed in its creation, which is fine in the first place, but it was very rushed. It was also disorganized in the beginning, and the person behind it itself was against the big four, but not against consumption of K-pop as a whole, which is a whole other issue. If you're gonna be against consumerist culture, it's all or nothing. And this person, the creator, I believe, tried to share playlists and or songs from Nugu groups, which is a Korean word for K-pop groups not known that well. And that's something I don't stand for. But many of us, we do stand for the intentions of consuming less and of being critical of these companies that, let's take in mind here, a lot of K-pop companies, we're just we're gonna lay the land real quick, okay, real quick. A lot of them have collaborations with Puma, which is directly on the BTS boycott list. A lot of them have worked with things like Coca-Cola, which is also on the boycott list. A lot of them have Starbucks in their videos, in their Instagram photos. K-pop idols, they have it in their Instagram photos. They're not covering the logo at all. So that it indirectly endorses Starbucks in a way. And also, I'll name drop Somi, who is a K-pop idol underneath the Black label. She took pictures with a Starbucks cup, and then she took that picture down because people were calling her out because allegedly Israel or Zionist companies or Zionists, they paid K-pop idols to promote Starbucks because K-pop fandom saw it, where a bunch of K-pop idols started seemingly at the same time posting pictures of Starbucks cups. And with that, we could follow what was happening
Right.
very much. But very much like K-pop idols, K-pop companies, they are not untouched by Zionism and by the state of Israel. Okay. They are not untouched by those things. Okay. K-pop industry is not a la la fantasy, happy land. It is very much directly touched and is directly used by different bodies to spread different types of messages to the fans.
Yeah. I think we can especially say that now in 2024. I think a lot of companies have come to realize the reach of K-pop. And again, we're in late stage capitalism. Of course, they're going to leverage that for their own goals. This is just how
Yeah.
it is. Yeah.
Like we've been seeing even in political campaigns for different presidential candidates around the world in different countries, they've used things like Swifties, they've used armies in their political campaigns. There's a lot of these people who run political campaigns who are working on them, working on the marketing, working on the public relations, and they're like, oh, we can use these online fandoms and communities who have so much power already to get support for voters. And they do that because online fandoms have shown that they're super duper powerful in organizing, and they've shown that when they do or when they like someone, they really like someone. It's disheartening to see as someone who has been in fandom for so long and who has been part of these conversations about how politics is mixed with fandom. There's a lot of conservative groups in America. If you go onto their websites, they will have somewhere something that is like anti-fandom and like anti, oh, we don't like fandoms, we think fandom, or like internet communities is like a
Right.
key word they use a lot because they don't like it when young people organize and when young people are connected with each other because that makes young people uncontrollable. And what's happening with a lot of political campaigns right now is people using online communities to support themselves. Because they're like, I'm an army. I'm a big BTS fan. I love BTS. We even saw Kamala Harris, vice president of
Right.
the US. She like put a BTS song in one of her playlists or whatever. And people like ate that up. They're like, oh my God, she's an army. She's so cool. It's targeted towards you. So that way you can do that and it gives them good press and it makes them look good. So that
Yeah.
way you ignore all the horrible things that these people do and these
Yeah.
people campaign for and these people
Yeah.
care about. And it's disheartening to see that. And we're just laying it right now. We're laying down the truth. We're laying down the land. Because a lot of people who will listen to this may not know that is happening. And it's important for you to know that's happening
Yeah.
because it, oh,
Yeah.
truly sucks.
I've seen this as an interesting trend in the army community around it's cute and fun when a company or an individual is playing with army, right? It starts out cute and fun. Oh, look, haha, they get our inside joke. Or, oh, look, there must be an army running that social media account or whatever, right? And we interact with that and they get their good clicks or whatever. And this happens a lot. But then the trouble is that is still us being manipulated. That's them cashing in on us. And the thing, if we keep giving into that, if we keep letting them into our space and manipulating us in that way, it's never going to stop. And then it goes from that kind of harmless, jokey interaction to something far more insidious, where all of a sudden we're supporting someone or we're supporting a company or whatever that's all of a sudden doing these kind of nefarious things behind the curtain, right? And so the way that we are actually being used to fund and source and support these things, and most people don't think about that. They're just like, oh, cute, haha, funny joke, retweet, whatever, and then that's it. And then there no more thought has been paid to it, but that's them capitalizing on us.
Yeah, and it's truly horrible. And I am so aggressive and I get very defensive when I see companies and people trying to do that. And a lot of times the response I get, especially from like newer armies, is, oh, you're being too mean. You're being too harsh on them. They haven't done anything wrong. But a lot of times, newer armies and even older armies too, who maybe have been active on and off, they don't see like the pattern of behavior that is happening every single time that these people come into our space. They come in, they act all cute, and then they ask us for something.
Yeah. And I will say that as a response to people who are like, oh, don't be mean. One, companies don't have feelings. Let's just set all that aside. Can't be mean to a company. They don't have feelings. And two, if it's an individual and they are actively engaging in this pattern of behavior that is ultimately going to be harmful to us, then see above conversation about it's okay to push back when people are using you and mistreating you and putting you in an abusive situation. So I say it's okay to be a little bit mean. I'm not endorsing violence and I'm not endorsing people like go out and dox whoever. It doesn't need to be extreme, but I think it's perfectly okay to A, not engage with the person, or B, block them, or C, warn other people to not engage with this because it is ultimately going to be harmful for our community.
Yeah, it's not hysterical. It's not being over defensive, and it's not basically caring too much or thinking, putting too much thought into it or looking too
Yeah.
much into it.
This pattern of abusive use of us is so consistent. It's like one of those patterns of behavior that I can clock it. It's okay, they've done this post. All right, let's go start the timer. We know what's going to happen next, and we know how this is going to play out. And it almost never ends well for us.
We need to be able to recognize that and we need to be able to fight against that. And it's a constant learning process. Also, doesn't help right now with the fact that so many armies are offline right now because we are just
It really
tired and
doesn't.
burnt out.
It,
There's not a lot going on. But yeah, sorry. Bringing it back to the boycott and armies' participation in standing up for Palestine. Boycotting is important. If you had asked me 6 months ago if I would ever boycott music from BTS, I would have said no. Because I would like to preface a couple things here. Number one, I am a funder army. I'm part of funding fan base. I am a assistant admin for a funding fan base. So supporting BTS financially has always been something that has been a priority for me. I'm someone, I have even educated my parents on fake merchandise so that way they never buy it for me for my birthday or for Christmas. I am very serious about buying official merchandise, about supporting official things, so that way BTS can get money in their pockets. They can get support in their pockets. Because that's like something that's very essentially important to me as someone who loves BTS and also loves art and wants BTS to be able to make whatever art they ever want to make. Now, with that, even with that preface, and with number two as well, I was an army with the ethos of supporting BTS no matter what. Right? There's things like Left and Right, the release of Left and Right, and Charlie Puth. I did not like Charlie Puth. I don't like Charlie Puth.
oh,
I
big same. He gives
will
me
say it.
all the bad vibes from that man. Yeah.
He's a very unkind, privileged man who uses his privileges to continue being unkind to people. And I personally don't like him. He himself as a person is not a good person. But I still supported left and right. I still streamed left and right. I still bought left and right because I care about BTS more than I care about the other person.
Yeah.
But very much, especially with the last couple collabs we've seen, especially with things like Usher and Justin Timberlake, and Justin Timberlake's a whole can of worms right there in itself. That man is disgusting. And I don't know. I even talked about it with a lot of older adults in my life about what happened to Justin Timberlake. And so many people I saw who used to be so down with Justin Timberlake and used to love him changed their minds so quickly about him, especially after Britney Spears released her book talking about what he did to her. Disgusting and awful. But also, Zionists. Right there. Right there.
Yeah.
And this was a point of contention within the funding fan bases and within streaming fan bases and within voting fan bases, like every type of fan base you can see. This is a behind the scenes look into it real quick, okay? I'm gonna be very vague here. We're just gonna brush on it. But there was a lot of contention behind the scenes on whether or not to support these releases. Because first off, number one, it was Jungkook's first solo album release ever.
Yeah.
Number two, these collabs are supposed to be pushes on the Billboard Hot 100 to help those songs sustain their positioning on the chart, which is super important for a lot of people. A lot of armies don't care, right? Armies do care about it because chart positioning is one of the ways that armies are able to combat a lot of the sleazy tactics of the music industry trying to suppress BTS and their success and trying to directly not talk about their success because you're forced to report a chart position. That's the thing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of armies who care about it, and especially for like good reason they care about it. But there are people having arguments, having paragraphs long messages about supporting the Usher and the Justin Timberlake releases. And that was a point of contention. I think now within my own funding fan base, we've come to a consensus. We've talked about it and everything. And now very much me and other people I work with are in support of not supporting every single collab every single time. Because it does matter, actually.
Yeah.
It actually is disgusting that we would ever feel pressure to support someone we didn't agree with.
Yeah. Should I out myself right now? As an individual who's not involved with a fan base, but who has actively bought singles and the albums and whatever, I do the support thing. Anyway, I have actively for those two song releases and the original Jack Harlow 3D, I did not spend money on those because I did not feel it was something I needed to financially support those individuals because I don't agree with things. I think honestly, the original 3D with Jack Harlow, like that was my turning point. So that was before all this stuff even blew up. But that was my like, you know what? I feel deeply uncomfortable with this collab. This is the only way for me to send a message about that without it being me getting canceled on the internet, apparently. Although I did, so there's that. Anyway, but so that was my, okay, this is my voice and this is how I'm going to choose to use it. And I think that was my turning point. And I think that everybody does what they want to do, but I do think that we're allowed to spend our money the way we want to spend our money and make our opinions known that way.
Yes, very much. We'll touch on this later. We'll touch on it later. But actually, let's just do it now. The attitude that armies have developed towards buying and streaming and voting has been detrimental to our community.
Yep.
This goes back into, I've talked about the concept of a relic army before, someone who holds onto old practices in the community and can't let go of them even after years. And I'm going to say this now, and this is going to be very controversial to a lot of people who I know personally as well who will not agree with me. But BTS are so far, so successful. Armies in 2016, when BTS went to that top social artist award at the Billboard Music Awards, they wanted to make BTS untouchable. And we've done it.
Yeah, we've arrived. It has been a mission accomplished.
It is 2024. BTS are now untouchable in their artistry. They have $1 billion company behind them that can give them whatever resources they want at any time to make music, to shoot music videos, to release merchandise, to do whatever they want.
Yeah.
We've done it.
Yeah.
Now is time as a community to transform and to let go a lot of the practices that honestly is killing our community.
Yeah.
Okay. For years, we've talked about streaming and how streaming is just listening to music. No, there are armies to spend 18-hour days just streaming, just focusing on streaming, of tracking streams, of testing so that way streams can be more efficient, in trying to figure out the new things happening in streaming platforms so that way they can make streaming more effective and better and get more streaming numbers to count and have multiple devices and do different IPs and blah 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 blah. Okay. We can't keep doing that. Okay. Streaming, we have to let go of the idea that streaming numbers is like solely representative of BTS popularity and of how hard Army works for each BTS release.
Yeah.
We need to let go of it because we have proof as armies of how manipulative the music industry already is and how streaming platforms already are, how streaming platforms manipulate music with playlisting and with recommending songs, with paid ads on the actual platforms themselves. And we have seen how payola with radio shows has influenced chart positions. We cannot keep pushing people to stream an impossible amount, to get an impossible number on a music chart, because we've seen that the music industry has done everything they can to make it as difficult as possible for us.
Yeah.
You cannot stream and buy as fans. We cannot stream and buy to death to have a chart position. The music industry has done everything they can to keep us out. And I think it's time to stop trying to kill ourselves and kill each other.
Yeah.
Over charting positions and over numbers. Because we've all seen the filtering rates.
Yeah.
We've seen unfiltered versus filtered streams. We've seen how arbitrary it looks and how different it is compared to other music artists. We've all seen it. And we know the music industry is predatory and it is directly trying to hurt us. And we need to stop. We need to stop at a certain point. Kate, what else do we need to do?
I'll just add on that to say that I completely agree. Especially right now, when we're on a rest. We're supposed to be resting, like big picture. They are not active right now. And this is a good chance for us to rest, recuperate, rethink what the future is going to be for us. They've been doing a lot of thinking. BTS has been doing lots of planning and thinking and reflection. And they've made that very clear that's what they've been doing. And they've made it very clear that when they come back, it's going to look different. It's not going to be the same BTS that we had in 2020 or before 2020. And this is our opportunity to do the same. Because we, as a community, we have grown and shifted and changed and morphed in ways that, like, I, as a researcher who is studying this space, can't even begin to encapsulate all of it. Like, we have shifted so much, even from just 2020 to now. And that's not even including all the years before that, right? We're so different. And then our platforms are changing. The algorithms are changing. Everything is shifting around us. And I think that this is a good moment for us, and coming back to the topic of this episode, putting a pause on literally everything while also having great benefits of disrupting the global economy in the way that we would like a boycott to do, also gives us a moment to be like, what is actually important to us? What's important to our community? What values do we have? Are we really a community that all we care about is numbers and we don't care about the art? We don't care about the value and humanity behind it? Are we just here to like line BTS's pockets and not care about any other humans on the planet? I don't think so. I hope not. I'm not. The community drew me in because of its humanity, because of its rhetoric around social justice, because there's hope here that I don't see in a lot of other spaces in my life. And I feel like pushing to just keep pouring money into things and to stream to death and to just like this constantly being on and worried and anxious and getting yelled at if you fall behind, that is like, that is just so harmful to the community as a whole. And I think we have this moment to really reevaluate and decide what is actually important to us as humans.
I definitely agree with that. It's just that I feel like Army as a community, we're not fighting for survival anymore. We've talked about this before. Shooters are a result of that fight for survival and the fight for BTS to just exist in the industry. The amount of cyberbullying, again, that BTS has faced has been astronomical, uncomparable, has been undeserved, and just completely malicious. But BTS themselves have told us that we don't need to do that anymore.
Yeah.
It's time to shift from fighting from survival to now legacy building.
Yeah.
What does Army want to be remembered by in the next 15, 50 years? Who do we as a community want to be? We can't. I'm sorry. I'm literally an assistant admin for a funding fan base. I'm a streamer. I put in a lot of hours. I'm a voter, and I've cared so deeply about these things for so many years. But I've seen how so many people have said, oh, it's not harmful, it's not stressful, it's not this and that. It's like you're lying to yourselves.
Yeah.
I see like my mutuals, my friends, they work so hard for these things. They're so stressed about these things, and they can't enjoy the music. They can't enjoy the releases, they can't enjoy the art because they're so stressed about the numbers. And of course, the numbers matter, but I think we need to stop worrying about it because I think BTS themselves have stopped worrying about it.
They have moved on. That has been accomplished. They clearly have a solid base of people interested in their art. And now they just get to make the art they want to make. And we get to sit and interpret it and enjoy it. And we can't do that if we're stressing. We can't do that if we're yelling at each other.
This is a message to like my friends too, but like I want to see a week where they're not stressed. And I want to see a week where they're not consumed by the chart position, consumed by the number, and consumed by the number of streams and how many sales we have and what we need to do, and consumed by what apps we need to vote on. And oh, this award we're falling behind. And oh, that one Korean trotch singer is above us again. And we have to do that again, and oh, we have to do this and that, and we have to buy more, and then no, the sales aren't counting because of this and that, and we need to stop. We need so desperately as a community to heal parts of our community that have not been able to rest for a decade now, and we need so desperately for those fans to be able to rest. Because I think those fans have done great work and they've really propelled BTS forward. But I want them to rest. because I'm worried about a lot of my friends' health. And I'm worried about how this is not sustainable in their lives. Because I think this happens every year, but like so many of my friends are like sick right now. And it's like, gee, I wonder why. It's because you spend hours a day online just doing this one thing. And I would like you to not be sick. Our community needs to change. And in response to that, we can also talk back to the boycott and how the community needs to change when it comes to the boycott. How are we feeling, Kate, when it regards to the boycott?
Yeah, and like we've been saying, I think that this is a chance. We are a whole community that is able to pull together and be a big force for change. And when we decide as a community to do something like a boycott, like that actually has impact and it matters because we're huge. And so when I see these calls, especially in these instances where it's a very clear, this is going back to who are we as a community? What do we value? This feels like something that should be a core value to us of stopping colonialism, stopping oppression, stopping genocide. Feels like things that we should be standing behind as a community. And boycotting is simply one of the easiest things to do because it's literally the absence of doing something. It's like not doing a thing. And I think that is, you know, it's just been interesting, and we can get into this more, but it's been interesting how much pushback there's been online about it.
Yeah, I've talked about this with people before too. It's like right now there's re-comebacks for a lot of things BTS related. So a re-comeback is basically like they're trying to recharge, repeak something that didn't get that high before. Recently we had the Face re-comeback because of the Jimin album. The Face finals got released and people wanted to do re-comeback for that, so they bought on iTunes, etc. And then there's also a re-comeback for Dark and Wild, and there's one that's going to be upcoming for Fake Love and Love Yourself Tear as well because it's getting a vinyl. For Dark and Wild, that's coming up because of its 10-year anniversary. And of course, these things are fun. We can participate them. It's good to reflect and think about like old releases and appreciate them again. But it's the fact that like in the midst of all of this is super embarrassing on their part. But we saw like this one army fan base account. Essentially, they were sharing stuff about Recomeback and about streaming numbers. And then they hid replies talking about Palestine on that tweet.
Yikes.
And it just, it's so, it's like BTS themselves wouldn't want you to act that way. Do you think BTS cares about the sales on a vinyl?
They really don't. They're very
Those,
rich. They
those,
they already have the money. They don't care.
exactly. The vinyl re-releases are for ARMY.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be a merch piece, if anything. Of course, it affects all the music charts and everything, but they don't need to do vinyls for everything. They're doing it for ARMY. It's like you can't even stop yourself from buying something. Stop yourself from spending money on something. It's truly embarrassing because I see that and I'm like, a fan base, they're supposed to be like a voice for the fandom. They're supposed to organize the fandom and support the fandom in a certain way. And so you can't even listen to other armies because you're so numbers obsessed. You're so obsessed with quote unquote BTS success, but you're using BTS as a shield. And you're not actually addressing the fact that you simply do not care about Palestinian lives. And you want to live in your own comfortable bubble. And you being uncomfortable is an inconvenience. And it's heartbreaking. Honestly, I tweeted about this. I wasn't really going to talk about it. I'm just going to talk about it now. This is going to be heavy for a second. What is this whole episode but heavy?
This entire episode is heavy.
But it makes me so disheartened to see that I'm just going to say it outright. Palestinian armies have died. There are Palestinian armies who we have not even had a chance to mourn yet. We have not even had a chance to speak their names, to see who they are. and to recognize that they are no longer with us. We have not even had that chance because the genocide in Palestine is still ongoing. And it's terrible to see that those armies are now dead and they're gone. And your response to people asking for you to help more armies, more just people to be alive, to be able to have a chance to have a future, to be able to go to BTS concerts, to be able to go to line stores and to be able to participate in streaming parties and able to go to pop-up stores, be able to meet BTS, be able to see BTS, be able to meet other armies. You just it's so inhumane, it's so unempathetic. You don't care. There are people who are dead who will never get the chance ever to see BTS in person. And you just sit there and you just think you're better than other people because you don't care. And it's so embarrassing because there are armies who will never get whatever future thing you're already planning for. You're saving money for supposed comebacks and front row barricade, but there's armies who won't ever get that because they are dead. And you don't have the empathy in your own heart to care about Palestinian people and to care about the fact that there are people like you who will never ever get what you think that you will deserve as a person. That was really heavy for a moment, but just it really weighs on me on the fact that it's so easy to boycott. It's so easy to ask for this. And we have already done so much, and people still there's so much resistance in armies. It's insane to watch, Kate.
There's resistance everywhere. There's resistance everywhere, but it is, I think for me, it's more shocking to see it in army because we have these core values, supposedly, and we have a shared ethos of wanting to make a better world. And it's really disheartening in that space where I've been actively working to try to make my own little corner of the world better. It's one thing if you choose to ignore everything and just not engage. We talk about this on a future episode that we haven't released yet, but I totally understand if your Stan account, whatever, you're not going to engage with this content. That's one thing. Okay. It's another thing to actively hide things that other people have posted. It's another thing to actively be dismissive of other people's posts and comments and thoughts. It's a whole other thing to be actively against people who are choosing to use this space to speak out about this, because as we've been talking about, this is a place where people spend a lot of their time and a lot of people are here. It would be ridiculous to not use this platform to educate and spread information and to work towards making the world a better place. And so for people to be actively working against that is disheartening. It's really upsetting. And for people to be like, this is my safe space, that's fine. But then you need to think about the fact that, number one, this is a public platform. So don't know how safe your space could ever be in that regard. But you get the privilege of deciding this is a safe space for you. Other people don't have that privilege. They don't have the privilege of internet right now. They don't have the privilege of running water or food or wondering whether they're going to be alive tomorrow. I question how much people are actively critically thinking about these things and how much they're actually, I guess you put it, is like they just don't care. And I think there's an active form of, especially for those of us who are in the West, we have a lot of privilege. We have a hand in what is going on in terms of our government is literally involved. And we have a lot of active disinformation coming from fairly legitimate sources. So I get that we're working against a lot here, but people are, like we said at the beginning of this episode, people are out there doing the labor for you. They are putting the information together. They are making it available to you. All you need to do is sit down and read an article, and you will be more informed than you were 10 minutes ago. And probably if you're listening to this episode, we are probably not even speaking to the right audience here for this. But I get so frustrated seeing that kind of active dismissal on the timeline. And if it's stuff like, if you don't want to engage with things, then use lists. Do things that help curate your space, but don't actively dismiss what's going on in the rest of the space for everyone else.
Yeah, because you don't get to choose what the space talks about.
Yeah.
Armies will organize, we'll talk about what we want to talk about. And if you don't want to participate in that, you don't have to. But
Yeah.
stop being dismissive of it. Because I just, I really hate it. Hate the fact that there's a lot of armies who try to be like, we don't need to talk about it here, or I'm doing stuff IRL. I don't need to talk about it here. You're still active on here. You're still talking on here.
Right.
We see you talking on here, talking about every little thing except the obvious thing that is happening. And Palestinian armies serve on a silver platter resources and
Yeah.
information. It is so easy, so accessible for you people. And you just don't have the capacity, you don't have the empathy to
Yeah.
care. And I've gotten very angry about this. I was very angry about it last night.
I did notice that. I love God, I've seen it a couple of times in the last few days too, which has been really irritating. But I love the commentary of, this is my music bubble, whatever, their little fandom bubble, and this is not a political space. And I actually laughed out loud when I read that the first couple times. I'm like, are they serious right now?
You are fans of the most politically charged music group in the world. We'll touch on this later. We'll
Yeah.
touch on this. But we got to keep going. Just a quote I want to share really quick as we're moving on. There's a quote from Angela Davis, who I talked about earlier. She's a Black activist who's very active during the civil rights movement and who is still alive, by the way. She's alive. She's okay. I just need to keep emphasizing that because there's so many people who think she's just dead or she's bygone or she's of the past. She's still alive.
It's so
Okay.
weird. I realized people thought she was dead.
No, it's wild, Kate. It's actually wild because it's like a form of disinformation. You know how all the black and white photos of MLK
Yeah.
and how that's used to make people think like happened way before. If there's colored photos of MLK. There's so
Right.
many of him. And it's just anyway, but this is a quote from Angela Davis I think about a lot and that I talk about a lot. But it's a quote, I am no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I am changing the things I cannot accept. That I think about that quote all the time. All the time. Us talking about this right now, us being advocates for this, it is hard.
Yeah.
Changing things is hard. Being the first to talk about something in your space is hard.
Yeah.
Okay. I have lost more friends in the past couple months than I ever have before in my life. It's hard to talk about these things,
It is.
but you have to.
Yeah.
And that's why we're here. And that's just a little preface before we go into our next part. Everyone, please buckle up. Please buckle up.
You thought the first part of this recording was rough. Buckle up.
We're going into the next part.
Phase 2. Second half, we took a break and now we're back. Maybe you all took a break too. I don't know. Now we're going to talk about the military industrial complex. Not a heavy topic at all,
I
especially.
wonder why it's related.
Is it? Is it related? Anyway, so we thought we'd start with a definition of what is the military industrial complex. And it's essentially the relationship between the government and weapons manufacturers that influences public policy to continue creating war for profit. So it's essentially, in the US, we're all very familiar with it, even though we may not actually know what it's called, but it's just the war machine that is making our country money, basically. And it's the thing that allows us to go and colonize other places, basically. So we're going to talk about it from our own personal backgrounds and perspectives to just give a sense of one, to Americans, how very different this experience has been. But also, I think it's important for everyone to know that there's a lot of complex nuance in this kind of bigger problem. And I will just start by saying that I am not a fan of the military industrial complex. I am anti the military industrial complex, but I will get more into that later. First, let's hear from Jhertau.
Yeah, I was just thinking about this too. When we were talking about it, the military industrial complex, it has affected my life and just like going through the American public education system where the military is always seen as like another avenue to go into. A lot of people when
Yeah,
I went to high school, they went straight into the military.
yeah.
And then how like my own family has been affected by it too. Because I know, like you're gonna talk about this later as well, but like when I was in high school, having the like military personnel come to the high school
Mm-hmm.
table, no one else, just the military
Yep.
at my public high school,
Yep.
that was so common. It was a normal thing.
Mm-hmm.
And isn't that weird that's so normalized? But in addition to that, I also have a lot of family history with the military industrial complex because I am Hmong. Now, many of you, if you've listened to this podcast, you might know a little bit about who the Hmong people are and who I am in the relation to like my ethnic identity. First off, the Hmong people, we are a minority ethnic group from southern China and southeastern Asia. And a lot of Hmong people who are in different parts of the world right now were refugees after the Vietnam War. Now, the timeline here gets blurry. It's weird because, first off, a lot of knowledge about the Hmong people and the Hmong people's involvement during the Vietnam War. It's all in documents that have not been declassified. So, gonna have to wait a couple more years on that. But from what we know and from what I've read and what I know from like my family as well, let's just start from the beginning. Okay? Hmong people hanging out in Laos, just hanging. A lot of like Hmong people are like a poor ethnic minority who live in the mountains, who live in the jungles, and live in villages during this time. This is 1960s, 1970s when the Vietnam War is happening. And the US comes into Laos. They weren't supposed to be in Laos during the Vietnam War. They said they weren't. They lied, which is a trend in a lot of historical things. And the US was not supposed to be in Laos, but they were because they were transporting weapons through Laos to Vietnam to get to troops that were allies with the US in Vietnam. So what would happen was that there were people on the ground. So this was like Hmong people and then also other ethnic minorities in Laos that they were using that were living in the mountains and that knew the trails in the mountains. So what would happen is the US airplanes would come from above and they would drop weapons down to the ground and then Hmong people they would get the weapons and then transport them to US troops on the ground. And let me preface this all here. I don't believe my older relatives had the geopolitical knowledge to know what was going on during this time with the war and their position in the war and how they were being used by the US military to transport weapons. Because it was either transport weapons or side with the Vietnamese army or die. And for a lot of people, they did not have a choice in this whole entire situation. And I think as I've gotten older, I've understood that more. There was a time in my life I was very angry. And I was like, why did this happen? And why did the relatives do that? And why did we do that? And why did the US come to Laos and blah blah blah. But I think now that I'm older, I've learned more and I've thought about it more. And I don't think that the relatives who might have been involved in that when that was happening in Laos knew exactly what was happening. Because very much the US was taking advantage of a lot of the groups of people living in the mountains during that time to do something they weren't supposed to be doing. They weren't supposed to be in Laos. Okay, let's preface that first. Number one, they weren't supposed to be there, but they were. And then they bombed Laos because the Vietnamese army was also in Laos. No one was supposed to be in Laos, by the way, but everyone was in Laos. Okay, this is the problem. This is the problem. Okay, it's the problem. And just and then the US like bombed a lot of Laos because the Vietnamese army was also in Laos. So a lot of Laos, if you don't know, listeners, if you don't know, is historically the most bombed country in the entire world because of how many bombs the US dropped on Laos during the Vietnam War. And it was very hard. And then the US pulled out of Vietnam and Southeast Asia after they supposedly won the Vietnam War. They did not win the Vietnam War. Okay. Just be clear on that. The US did not win the Vietnam War at all. And then they left the Hmong people and a lot of ethnic minority groups that helped them during the Vietnam War essentially to get persecuted by the Vietnamese army for helping the US. And a lot of the Hmong people during that time, there's a lot of Hmong people who couldn't flee, by the way. Disabled Hmong people who couldn't leave their property, who couldn't leave their families. And a lot of Hmong people did die during that time. There's a lot of Hmong culture that was lost. There's a lot of Hmong families that were lost, and a lot of people who just straight up are no longer here with us because of what happened during this time. And my mom and my dad, they're both children during this time. And after the Vietnam War, as the Vietnamese army began persecuting Hmong people and other ethnic minority groups in Laos, they had to flee. And my mom talks about this a lot, about like how scary it was during that time. Because like when you're fleeing, there's people who scam you, take your money, and there's people who try to hurt you. And then there's also the bombs still in Laos undetonated that you have to avoid. And it's just jungle. There's no clear paths anywhere. And a lot of the Hmong people, they had to go from Laos to Thailand, to refugee camps in Thailand, to then get taken to the US and other countries that would take them as refugees. And that's what happened with my parents. And a lot of people didn't know why the Hmong people were coming to the US and to other countries. There's a lot of Hmong people in Argentina and France, and no one knew why the Hmong people were going to these countries. But it was because the Hmong people helped the US during the Vietnam War, and then the US tried to leave the Hmong people there to get persecuted and killed because the Hmong people did not know what was going on. Let's preface this, okay? There were Hmong people who did know what was going on. People talk about him a lot, this General Vang Pao. And he was the military leader of the Hmong people, and he talked a lot to the US generals and to the US president. And there were people who did know what was going on. A lot of the Hmong people during that time were like victims of the military industrial complex and being used by the military industrial complex to further war. And with all of that, my mom and dad's families, they escaped from Laos and they stayed in the refugee camps in Thailand, and then they came to the US. But it's so despicable because it's like the Hmong people were used by the US. And it's like a point of contention in the Hmong community. On both, the Hmong people were not recognized for supporting the US and weren't like given veterans benefits or anything like that. And simultaneously, it's also so wrong that the Hmong people themselves were forced to help the US, number one. And then afterwards, they were forced to leave their homes. Because I don't think if you live in the mountains and you're just hanging out with no Wi-Fi and no internet and no books and no learning and no anything, I don't think you have the geopolitical knowledge to decide whether or not you want to involve yourself in a war. Okay, just my existence is like a result of the military industrial complex, and it's so hard to talk about. We have to wait a couple of years for more declassified documents. But like having a full scope of how the Hmong people were affected by the war, and like to this day, there's a lot of anti-communist like sentiment within the Hmong community. And the Hmong community itself still has generational trauma from war and being refugees and escaping war. And it's present everywhere I go. And everywhere I go being Hmong. Like even like me having to explain who the Hmong people are in our history, like that's itself like exhausting because no one knows who we are because we were literally torn from our homes and from our homeland. And I don't even think we can go back to Laos ever. Like I've talked about it with my family and like my parents, and they're like, yeah, like the villages that used to be there aren't there anymore. The place that they used to call home is no longer there. It's really devastating to me because I have this conversation a lot with people where they're just like, why do you care about Laos at all? Aren't you happy you live in America? I have healthcare. I also had medical problems when I was a kid, so people always like, you would have died if you were in Laos, if you were born in Laos. And that's not the point. The point is that I'm really sad that I never got to live in the homeland, like in the place where not like where like I belong or like where I supposed to be, right? But it's like a life that people's lives were torn and people were ripped from their homeland because of the military industrial complex. And then I am like the generation afterwards who has to deal with the generational trauma of that. And also like dealing with this feeling like this happens all the time with children of refugees and immigrants where it's like the identity crisis where like we don't know a lot of we talk about this all the time. I'm second generation college student because my parents went to college, but I'm first generation born in America. And it's like that loss of culture and that loss of identity and who we are. Like there's studies about this where refugees and immigrant families when they come to the US, they lose their community and it's like their health is worse in the US, even though the health care is supposed to be better. It's like the stress of losing culture and it's really hard. And I am someone deeply uncomfortable with the military industrial complex. And I think like when I was younger, I was really mad because I was like, why doesn't the US give veterans benefits to Hmong people who fought in the war? But then now I'm older and I'm just like, why did they use us in the war at all?
All valid
So,
questions. All
all
of them.
valid questions. I think maybe I'll feel differently in 5 years when I get older too. It's hard. It's hard existing and being Hmong, but I'm proud of being Hmong. It's just I wish that I do have my culture, but I wish my culture was still intact, and I wish my people were. There's a lot of people who died during the war that I wish were still here and that I could have met. And it's hard. It's hard healing that, but we're healing. Yay! How do you feel about the military industrial complex, Kate?
My story is completely different, obviously, for obvious reasons.
That's wild. We
What I
have different
know.
stories. We're different people.
Oh my gosh. So I'm now going to discuss the other side. I'm going to gloss over family history stuff. I'm going to just give the highlights, but I'm going to give the highlights because these are not actually my stories to tell because they're my parents and my aunts and uncles and so on. So anyway, so sorry for lack of detail, but I will say that my family has a history of participating in the military, especially on my father's side. Both my grandfather and my father were in the Air Force. And my father actually was stationed, he was a captain in the Air Force and was stationed for a year in Vietnam during the Vietnam War. So there's that history there. And then on my mom's side, my oldest uncle was actually drafted during the Vietnam War. So he actually was drafted and sent to Vietnam. And I had other uncles on my mom's side of the family then because of that, thinking about evading the draft and going to Canada. So they didn't end up doing that, but it was a serious discussion in the house. So yeah, so lots of generational trauma from having folks in my near vicinity who had experienced war as an American person in a war. And so I grew up in that kind of space. And then my mom during the Vietnam War, actually, she was still in high school, but she actually went and she protested the war as a high schooler. She skipped class and went and protested in the streets. Very different things going on in my family, but also me growing up, I grew up with like kind of the messaging of war bad. It really screws you up and it's not great for other people. And so that was the ethos in the house, was just like I was seeing firsthand how it was impacting people in my life and kind of the after effects of being forced to participate in that. And then I grew up partially in Southern California. We'll ignore that part. But when I was in high school, I lived in rural Washington state. And so imagine this is like lower socioeconomic status neighborhoods, less just general opportunities for people. There wouldn't be a lot for kids to do when they graduated high school if they didn't have the resources to go to college. A lot of kids ended up doing kind of blue collar jobs and stuff. And my high school had we had a whole program for training students for different kinds of like labor jobs. And so there was like, you could basically skip high school and go do an apprenticeship as a mechanic and things like that. And those were the paths open to a lot of the kids that I was going to high school with. And then, so of course, one of the big paths open, especially to the guys in my high school class, was military. And just like Jhertau said, we had Air Force, military, Navy. They came to all the functions, like career fairs. They were like just there all the time because they knew like this is where they were going to get their new people from, right? Anyways, and I just remember having these feelings of being like deeply uncomfortable that they were there. And so that was me coming from my family and knowing, right? And just feeling, and this might shock you all, but I was an extremely gung ho activist type high schooler. So it was just like it was a very tense thing. But for lots and lots of families, and lots of kids that I went to school with, this was their out. This was, this was how they could to mobilize themselves and come up in the world and like maybe have a leg up for their kids. So this was their opportunity. And a lot of that recruitment happens. It's interest. I don't have all the details, but it's basically they start recruiting you pretty young and you can sign promise waivers and stuff. There's like all these weird things. So they can't technically enlist until you're 18, but that doesn't really matter. Anyway, so here's all these kids. This is their plan. And then I was a junior in high school, which is 11th grade, the year before we're all graduating, and 9/11 happened. And so all these kids who were enlisted or were going to be enlisting all ended up in the Middle East because of the fallout and the decisions our government made after 9/11. And so there's a lot of kids from my hometown who did not come back. They died there, or they came back, but they are on disability or are otherwise affected by all of that. And I will say, though, that as part of it, it's just a very normalized part of the culture, especially in different places in America where the military is venerized and it is, it's the respectable thing to do as an individual, is to go that route. And at least that was the case 20 years ago when I was graduating high school. But I'd be super curious like what it's like now. I see some, and we're going to get into this later, but I see some sentiments on Army and I recognize the sentiments that I'm seeing. So even people who might be like anti-war might still have this kind of sentiment of pro-military because it's a part of our culture. It's very normal to like a guy in uniform kind of thing, even though what it actually represents in reality is colonialism and horrifying stuff. So that's my story. Yay. So also very touched, very like my life has been very impacted in very real, very consequential ways by the military industrial complex. And I feel it's possible there are people out there that have not given this that much thought, but this has been a conversation in my family since I can remember.
Honestly, just Like, our experiences are so different, but it's like the same conclusion.
Isn't that funny how that works?
That's so interesting.
Totally different experiences.
It's
Same.
almost like the military industrial complex oppresses everyone.
It's almost like it's a bad thing.
Yeah. It oppresses people in the heart of the empire. It also oppresses people who are outside of the empire. It's a bad thing.
So
I
what does
guess
this have to do with BTS?
what this has that is a wild question, Catherine Ringland.
Why are we having this conversation on a podcast for Army about Army?
Yes, but I wonder why. We all know BTS are currently enlisted in the military, all 7 members, and the South Korean military system is vastly different from the American one. In South Korea, they have mandatory conscription, which means that once you reach a certain age, you have to enlist before a certain age. Because in South Korea, they are a country constantly at war. I wonder why.
Who might be responsible for that? I don't have any guesses.
You know what drives me up a wall, Kate? The fact that the Korean War is called the Forgotten War in US history. And it's just like,
I was taught nothing about the Korean War in US history. Nothing. That's it. Nope. There's a reason it's called that because they don't teach it in high school.
and it's purposeful because we'll say it. South Korea is a military proxy for the US government.
Yeah.
And the US government uses South Korea as basically a gigantic military base so they can have access to China and Russia right there.
Yeah.
As an active military base, South Korea has mandatory conscription, and South Korean men are forced to serve in the army. And they can't get out of it. We've seen stories of people who try to get out of it. They basically get their citizenship revoked, and they can never come back to South Korea. They leave their whole families, they leave everyone they've ever known. Because, we'll talk about this, military conscription in any capacity is inhumane. It's asking people to become killers, it's asking people to become tools of the state, so that way the state can continue to enact violence and do things for their own agendas. War always is a rich man's problem fought by poor people. Okay? Kate was talking about it, lower socioeconomic area.
The poor people just become the cannon fodder.
Exactly. It's always, once again, the rich people using the poor people to push their own wants. Okay? Like America fighting in the Korean War, like America supporting the South, it was all political. It wasn't like, oh, we care so much about this humanitarian cause. No! They now use South Korea as a military base, a whole country as a military base. Also, some of the biggest US military bases are in South Korea, and they function as their own cities. It's awful. And BTS are victims of the military industrial complex and victims of this. Just as Kate and I, our own lives are touched by it. We are all victims of it, and BTS especially, as people who are forced to serve. People might say, oh, they had options. They were not good options.
They were bad options.
Yes. That one offer from the South Korean government for them to continue doing stuff, but all the profits go to the government and the government can tell them whatever to do. That's basically conscription right there. It's forced labor. It's the government controlling every action you have. And it's just, Kate, do you want to talk about this more too?
I would like to add that there have been several prominent Korean men that have come out in the last few months talking about their experiences and talking about their own thoughts and opinions about the entire system, including Anton Her. Do a shout out to Anton Her. And I highly recommend, if this is new information to you, to go seek those voices out and go read their threads and watch their videos. Because what we're saying, we're just repeating what we have heard from the source at this point. This is again one of those things where people have been doing the work for you, and this is an opportunity to go educate yourself more before you like, I have been quiet about a lot of this stuff for a very long time, and I have been spending that time reading and watching videos and seeing interactions on Twitter and like actually doing my best as someone who's sitting in a very privileged position to understand what that is like for them.
Yes, and it's important to do that. And also to contextualize this from an army perspective too. Armies themselves have not talked about enlistment so openly since the past 2 years. Okay? Before 2022, when BTS themselves started talking about enlistment or openly, it was a taboo topic in army because
Right.
number one, a lot of us are not Korean. A lot of us do not, we're not Korean, we're not Korean men at all who have to go or forced to go through this process anyway. And a lot of people saw it as like an uncomfortable topic and something that shouldn't be talked about. And the only reason we started talking about it so openly is because BTS did, and also because of how the government was treating them during that time too. We saw of Yet to Come in Busan. BTS can't say no to the government. They're literally being tossed around like tools by the South Korean government because the South Korean government, even we saw with the Boy Scout Jamboree and how Hybe was forced to send photo cards because even though the members themselves couldn't go, but they still had to send BTS photo cards to appease the world and those little Boy Scout kids. Oh, I feel so bad for them. Oh my God. Just armies talking about enlistment is very hard. Us talking about this so openly, if I showed myself 3 years ago this podcast, I would scream.
If I showed myself 6 months ago this podcast, I would be like, alternate reality much?
Yeah. Like, it's very hard for armies to talk about enlistment, and it's even harder to watch BTS go through it now. We could talk about this. The South Korean military keeps trying to use armies to promote propaganda for the
Yeah.
military. We see it. Don't go looking for this. Even though I'm talking about this, don't go looking for it because you will be
Don't give
very
them
upset.
clicks.
Don't give it clicks just so you can get mad at it. Don't do that.
It's not
Okay?
worth your mental health.
We're talking about this so that way you can know about it and so that we all are on the same page. But there was a video released and Namjoon is speaking in it. And it was released through South Korean military platforms. So he did not post it on Instagram. He did not post it on his own personal Weverse or anywhere he personally was controlling. It was posted by the South Korean military. It's basically a propaganda piece. He's basically talking about training and praising the military. It's propaganda. People see Kim Namjoon of BTS, who is an artist, a poet. People keep saying this, and I need to say it too, because it deeply upsets me. But they seriously took a poet's pen and they gave him a gun. And it is so deeply unsettling and disgusting that the South Korean military creates propaganda with them in it. And people are like, he's saying it. He's saying it. So he's like agreeing with that. Are you telling me, Namjoon, RM of BTS, who has written so much like that is anti-military, that is against oppressive systems, so much about freedom, so much about artistry and life. You're telling me that he's going along with a propaganda piece when he's forcibly conscripted into the military. And he is also, in addition to that, he also has basically no rights in the military. And it deeply upsets me. Deeply. I know you didn't watch the video, Kate, but I, I
I
don't know.
did
How did
not.
you feel about that?
It upsets me to the point where I did not look for the video. I did not watch the video. I avoided most people talking about the video. I have seen how being actively in the military impacts individuals. And knowing that any people are anywhere near that is already upsetting to me. And knowing that BTS is anywhere near that is extremely upsetting to me. And knowing that my fears about how BTS was going to get used by the military is now coming to fruition. It's as tragic as it is unsurprising.
It truly is tragic. We could talk about this too, because it's deeply upsetting. And BTS themselves just being in the military, any South Korean man in the military is constantly risking their lives just being there. For BTS in particular, it's they're celebrities, and it's like there's people who want to hurt them. There's people who want to be close with them, weird stalker people. And I'm gonna talk about it. But like when Jin he got that random vaccine from that nurse who just wanted to be near him, and just how disgusting that is, of how someone could compromise his health like that. What if that was a malicious person who wanted to hurt him and could have given him something like fatal? It's like stuff like that that makes me so disturbed. The South Korean military, it just like everything about it. And a lot we're talking about South Korean military specifically right now, but it's like all militaries around the world do this. It's like they're stripping human beings of their rights and they're putting them in dangerous situations. And then when they can't protect them in those situations, they go, "Oops, sorry. Sorry we did that." And it's like, "No, they shouldn't have been there in the first place." Did you read about that when that happened, Kate?
Yeah. Yeah, that was like, for me, that was the moment where I was like, oh, I need to be on Twitter lists. As I was like, I do not want this constant, for me and my own mental health. I know that bad stuff is happening. I just know. I understand the bigger picture here. I know bad stuff is going to happen. Hopefully not terrible stuff, but I know these incidents are going to keep happening. And I don't want the blow by blow. I don't really want to have to think about that too much myself. Because that was the first one I was like, you know what? This is going to be really awful for me if I have to keep living through this while this is happening. And there's literally nothing any of us can do about it. Because it's like not my country. It's not my, you know. So anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. It makes you truly feel powerless.
Yeah.
And also you like I like Army, I keep saying this, like we're self-cannibalizing ourselves because we are just so distraught all the time. And like stuff like this, when it enters the TL, like the amount of just it's like you see a community on fire. It's like people are just so deeply upset about it, rightfully. But it's like draining the community of its life force every single time something like this happens. Because there's
Yeah.
more stuff that's happened that I'm not going to mention in this episode.
Yeah.
Because a lot of it's in Korean. It hasn't been translated to English purposely by K armies. K armies did a lot to protect international fans, which I do appreciate. And
Shout out
some
to that.
shout out.
Yes.
And there's some things that, like, as international armies, we do not always need to know because it just causes us stress. And it just, like international armies don't know how to handle it. K armies, like, there's a lot of K armies do to protect us, I will say. And there's a lot of rumors about the members. There's a lot of stories about the members from people who supposedly have worked with them or seen them in the military. And we don't know if it's true or not. We don't know what's happening. And we just need to sit tight and also speak up against the military industrial complex. Thank you.
And I think for me, I think like me actively deciding no, the way I need to spend my energy again is thinking as somebody who lives in a global context in a global world, and I know I have lots and lots of international friends and stuff. I am working over here to make my corner of the space better, right? So yes, it's terrible what's happening. I hate that we're going through this with BTS, but what can I do about it? And I can work to speak out against my government's involvement and my government's continued buy-in to this military industrial complex at large. And, you know, speaking out in my spaces where, I do have a voice and reach. so I'm going to use it, which is why we're recording this podcast. But I do feel helpless, but I also feel like, okay, what can I do in my little space? How can I chip away at this? And I feel if all army did that, if we were all globally contributing to this idea of making change in our spaces and pushing for change where we can, then the world would become a better place.
Yeah, it truly is about each person doing a little bit of something. I don't know, being an army makes me believe in that so hard. Like I've talked about this before, that like every individual person, if every individual person just did a little bit, you can change the world right there. And
Yeah.
it's so true. Like we're seeing it now. I know we're hating a lot and we're being frustrated a lot of armies who are not speaking out about Palestine. I know we're doing that. But also, a lot of armies are putting in the work to talk
Yeah.
about Palestine, to go against the military industrial complex, to speak out against forced military conscription. And those armies truly are like the life and blood of this fandom right now. Our fandom needs needs very much to be against a lot of systems right now, and especially because BTS are not the helm right now. That's the whole
Right.
thing.
And they literally right now are voiceless in the biggest sense of they aren't here right now. And like we were saying earlier, this is a time for us to put the values that we've adopted from them, put those into action and be their voice while they can't have one.
Yeah. Like you saying voiceless really, ooh, that hit me. Like it's really true that they don't have a voice. Because I know there's a lot of armies who are very frustrated they have not said anything, which is so valid. Like I myself am putting pressures on content creators I like YouTubers and live streamers, and being like, hey, what's up? Hey, you gonna say anything? Because your silence is complicit. Because I see content creators who say stuff already. And I'm like, they can say it. How come you can't? What's your problem? And it's just, I know a lot of people are frustrated BTS have not said anything. And there's so many, I keep encountering this in real life, Kate, where people are like, you like BTS, but they haven't said anything about Palestine. So, thus, they are horrible, bad, terrible people. I literally, in those conversations, I just leave. Because you are someone who are not coming into a conversation to have an actual conversation about the way the South Korean military literally strips people of their rights. You're not here to have that conversation. You're just here to make me mad.
Yeah.
And that in itself makes me mad.
Yeah. And I will say that, like, as we kind of preface this whole episode with, I understand if people are in a position where they can't speak out for whatever reason. And BTS are included in this. Not only are they currently enlisted and literally do not have a say in what they put out in the world right now, they literally cannot say anything right now. They're also, as we rightly pointed out, their whole country is connected and deeply tied with the US right now. And the US clearly has a very specific view on what is happening in Palestine that is clashing with what we're saying here on this show and what a lot of Americans are actually feeling at the moment. And I get it, especially people who are in a precarious position where they're vulnerable, right? Because they don't have control over their own bodies right now. So I get it. They can't say anything. But I think I think the thing I would turn around on people and who are like, oh, how come XYZ hasn't said anything? It's like, well, how about you just go say things then? How about you have that conversation? Or I like the idea of approaching content creators and being like, hey, can you do this? You have a voice, you have this many followers, say something. And that feels more productive than throwing blame around. It's almost like an anti-move to be like, your faves haven't said anything yet. It's just, I'm sorry. Is this a K-pop war? What are we doing here? This is a humanitarian crisis. And you're gonna be like that with me?
No, actually, I don't know. It's so frustrating because it's BTS are an example of people who can't speak and say anything or do anything right now. But there's like a lot of other people right now who are in precarious positions right now who literally cannot say anything. There are some people fighting battles right now with legal battles who can't say anything. There's people who are like in positions in government who can't say anything, but are resisting in their own ways. Kate and I resisting right now, when this is released, there might be consequences for both of us.
Yeah.
But we're both going into this fully knowing that.
Yep.
Because this matters to us very deeply. And I understand that perspective of it, but I just want to make that clear. There's people who can't say anything. There's people who are choosing to not say anything. And there's people who are saying things.
Yeah.
And you gotta figure yourself out there. What I don't like, this happens on Twitter all the time, Army Twitter. There's like armies who are like, I can't say anything directly because of my job in real life. But then all they ever say is like anti-Palestinian sentiments.
Yeah.
It's, you can't say anything, but you're saying something. And I cannot.
Because I was just going to say, one of the things I've noticed as I've been thinking about how different army have been reacting and stuff, something I've noticed is especially army who are coming from a place of extreme privilege. So I'm mostly aiming this at armies from the West, where I've just been thinking about how it's hard if you don't live it. And everyone just heard our two personal stories about how we've been impacted by all of this. But if you don't live the experience of being colonized and living in a colonized state, and thinking about the place you're living in as a colonized state, then you're not going to get it. You're not going to understand why things are the way they are. And I think this speaks a lot to what we were just talking about with BTS picking and choosing their political battles and figuring out when they can say things, and especially now that they can't say anything. I wanted to read this quote out. So this was Namjoon in that, the English translation of that, let me pull up the actual name of the article. In this article, this whole interview after Indigo came out, right? It was part of an Indigo promo, I think, or a little after his Indigo promo. Anyway, I want to read the quote. And probably lots of people will recognize this because it made waves when he said it. And I'm just going to read the first part of it because the context here is they were asking about the K-pop industry and the pressures that trainees and stuff go through, and like young idols, like all the pressure they're under to be machines and create things, like that whole stereotype, right? So he's responding to that. And he says, in the West, people just don't get it. Korea is a country that has been invaded, razed to the ground, torn in two. Just 70 years ago, there was nothing. We were getting aid from the IMF and the UN, but now the whole world is looking at Korea. How is that possible? How did it happen? Because people try so fucking hard to get better themselves. You are in France or the UK, countries that have been colonizing others for centuries, and you come to me with, oh God, you put so much pressure on yourselves. Life in Korea is so stressful. Yes, that's how you get things done. And it's part of what makes K-pop so appealing, although, of course, there's a dark side. Anything that happens too fast and too intensely has side effects. And I think that I want everyone to sit with that. I want them to really not just hear, oh, look at him go, clap back, but really sit with what he's saying and understand that all of this stuff we've been talking about, the whole military industrial complex, all of this is all historically embedded in colonization and these countries going from one place to another and destroying cultures and destroying people and destroying land. And I think that, you know, it's important for us to reflect on that. And I think that what is currently happening in Gaza is just more of that. It's literally the same pattern over and over again. And I think people need to sit with that.
They do need to sit with that. Namjoon saying this is not like you're saying, it's not just haha clap back, so funny. This is like living, breathing proof of how Namjoon himself is not stupid, is not ignorant about this. And it's seriously demeaning the way some people try to act like any type of pro-war, pro-military thing he would ever be forced to say is something he believes in. Because Namjoon himself is so aware of what is happening. And he is aware of what's happening to his own country, by the way, that he is born and raised in.
Yeah.
He knows. And I really do think it's like a symptom of just colonialism and just the West, just white supremacy and just like the imperial complex of how so many people who are not Korean speakers or people who are like English speakers or like Western people, they see Namjoon and his intelligence, and he's like intelligent to like a point for them.
Yeah.
He knows so much, but only to a point for them. And a lot of people don't understand that Namjoon, he knows so much, and he is so aware of so much. And he is not like, he's so smart as a joke or as like an archetype or something. He is genuinely an incredibly intelligent person who just so happens to also be one of the greatest musicians alive. People always say this, but if Namjoon was not a musician, he would have done great things elsewhere.
Yeah.
Because he himself as a person, as the person Kim Namjoon, is just incredibly intelligent. And it like this is like breathing proof of how he knows. He is educated on this and he cares about this. And like people in the West, like this goes hand in hand with them not recognizing their privilege and also not recognizing his own words. And like how BTS themselves like are aware of the own systems they are under.
Right.
Like it's so it all goes hand to hand. BTS are intelligent people who are aware of what is happening. And a lot of people can't get on board with that.
I sense some frustration. But yeah, I get that. I feel that same way, not just from quotes like this, but dismissal of lyrics. And I feel that frustration because it's just, they are there telling us the words. They're telling us their opinion. They are saying the quiet stuff out loud. You just have to know how to listen for it.
Yeah, you truly do have to listen for it. This is the whole thing with it really is just because of the language barrier. Like, and also the ethnocentrism of America. It's just the way that people, if you don't speak English, they don't respect you and your words. It's again like how a lot of white American armies will just like never have the perspective needed to fully understand BTS because they are just so ethnocentric. It's if BTS don't sing in English, don't speak in English, then I don't listen to it. Like this article itself isn't in English. It's in Spanish. El País. Oh fuck! It's because I don't have a subscription. They're not letting me in. Subscribe me. Anyway, it's because not all of BTS are fluent in English, and then Namjoon himself is not constantly speaking English. That a lot of people don't respect their words. And once again, this ties in with the military-industrial complex. As you know what the military-industrial complex does? It colonizes places. And then what does colonization do? It builds into ethnocentrism. And then what does ethnocentrism do? It keeps continuing and then creating racism and then bias towards certain languages. So it's almost like everything's interconnected and
It's
all forms.
almost like it's all connected.
It's
Whoa.
like, whoa. Yeah. But following into that, we have a couple more points. Just a couple more to touch on real quick, team. We're here to say armies who are trying to be pro-war, pro-military, essentially, no. No,
That's just a nope.
we're not gonna buy into it. I refuse, okay, Kate, I refuse our fandom to be used as pawns by the South Korean, thus the American military, to promote military propaganda.
Yeah.
This is my form of resistance. This is my act of resistance, okay? Like, I am so mad. Like, I will never accept it. I don't care how many people get mad at me or annoyed with me. I will never accept us being used like that.
Just say no, Army. Just say no.
Every time it happens, we have this conversation every time something about BTS related to military comes out.
Yeah.
People going, "Oh, they look so cute in uniform. Oh my god, he talked about the military. It's so cool. Oh my god, he's so cute." No, no. The South Korean military will be not be using BTS Army ever as tools of propaganda. And I will continue to be angry about that. And I will continue to publicly talk about it. People are like, "You're American. You don't have any right to talk about it. You're not even Korean." And I'm a human being. I know what's right and I know what's wrong. And I think being used by the military for propaganda is wrong, especially an international community of people who, like, one of our base ethos as armies, we're spreading love, we're spreading kindness, we're spreading happiness to the world. We're sending good to the world. And I will never let our name be tainted. I will never let us be used to spread military propaganda ever. How do you feel about that, Kate?
I'm just going to say big agree. And I'm saying this, I'm coming from a literal place and culture where I get it. There is an ingrained cultural response from certain subsets of people to be like, oh, cute boy in a uniform. I get it. But now is the time to train yourself out of that and to not do that because it's so harmful and it's perpetuating harm.
It is. It is. We need to stop accepting anything given to us through the military with the military attached to it in relation to BTS. We need to stop doing that because BTS themselves going to the military is already a forced thing that sucks. And it really does suck because it's part of the military industrial complex that hurts so many people around the world. Anyway, on to the next point. BTS are all inherently political people. BTS and their bodies of work. BTS as their bodies physically, as people, as South Korean men, they are political. BTS, their bodies of work, their music, their art, all political. At any point in time you're in army spaces, we talked about this earlier, you cannot argue no politics.
Yeah. Army being a community is political. Us coming together as a majority women, majority people of color, I can't actually give you the numbers on that, but I'm positive it's true. But us being together, promoting positive values, fighting against tyranny and oppression and colonialism and genocide, that is us being we're here political as a political body, and we are here because of BTS. It is all connected. And so the next time somebody says don't bring politics into this space, I laugh because it's go read some lyrics. This entire experience, this entire exercise in BTS is political.
Yes. Themselves, in their first song ever, No More Dream, they criticized Sky, which is
Yeah.
the three biggest universities in South Korea, most prestigious ones. They criticized them in
Yeah.
it. And that is a form of resistance in itself.
Yeah.
The BTS have been political. Even BTS's most recent works are political.
Yeah.
Okay? Jungkook standing next to you, that has been used as a song of resistance for people. There's literally Palestinian people who have posted videos with standing next to you in it. That song is inherently political.
Yeah.
Even if Jungkook did not intend it, it's become political now.
Yeah. Just by Jungkook singing it and performing it, it is political. There's just
Yes.
you can't there's no escaping it. Anything any of these men do, create, is going to be a political statement just by the sheer fact of the bodies they inhabit and the places they're from.
Yes. Standing Next to You being released as an all English song by a South Korean man, who, by the way, is not fluent in English, but props to him for learning. That is so hard learning other languages. King right there. Like, that is a form of resistance in itself. Like, he uses a language to create art. Like, each of the members are just so political as individuals. Like, I feel like people always focus on like Rapline all the time, and it's true. Rapline are so explicit with it, especially Yoongi. That
Yeah.
man, he's going for it
Him.
every time.
Love
Every
him.
time. Okay? But then there's Vocal Line also do it, even if in more subtle ways. Like one of Jin's like main forms of resistance is him talking about rest.
Yeah. Gosh, I love him so much for that, by the way. Just every time I think about it, I'm like, I love that man. Because yes, his all of them embody different forms of resistance. All of them do. And they can be quite explicit about it too. They're there saying these things. And I appreciate that about them. I think that's maybe one of the biggest things that drew me to them in the first place. Was I was like, I like what these dudes are saying. Yeah.
Yes, that's so true. It really is. BTS are political, armies are political, we are all political bodies because we all live in a political world. Which is
Yeah.
unfortunate. I'm aware that there's some people who have very privileged lives. We touched on this earlier a little bit, where they never have to think any ever about their privilege and who they are as people and the politics around them and how political some people existence is, right? Every day I wake up and I know my existence as a person is an act of resistance. And me being alive right now is almost impossible, somewhat, right? My parents, as children, could have died trying to get to Thailand to the refugee camps. They could have died multiple times in Laos, like during the Vietnam War, from all the bombing that happened, from just all like the sickness that happened as well in Laos during that time. And it's like my existence as a person is defying like the military industrial complex itself. And it's just that's who we are. We are defying it. And we are here to resist the military industrial complex and resist oppressive systems. These podcast episodes, they don't ever get to hear me sound like this sometimes because this is how I am in real life, guys.
Filtered Jhertau.
Unfiltered. I was meant to be a Cres major. Unfortunately, I'm going to cognoscience. Unfortunate. It's rough out here. It was a lot. Any concluding thoughts, Kate?
Oh my gosh. My concluding thoughts are, I guess I'm just going to end with the question of what are you doing in your lives to subvert and to disrupt the atrocities and the violence and the oppression that's happening around you and globally? What are you doing? And is there something more you can be doing? Because the answer is probably yes. And what's that going to be?
I
That's
agree with that. Good questions to ask yourself.
Yeah.
With me, some of my final thoughts is just get comfortable with being comfortable.
Yeah.
Freeing Palestine is only one step in active liberation for the entire world. And that might seem lofty, that might seem difficult for a lot of people, but it's gonna happen. Palestine is one step in that. And Palestine will be free. They will be liberated within our lifetime. We're not leaving it for our grandchildren to figure out. We're gonna figure it out now. That's the plan. And very much one final thought I leave with all of you is to also do what you can. Kate very much was talking about doing a little bit more, but also don't kill yourself trying to save the world.
Yes. Do what you can, but also I think that the important thing that should be said here is like things like we're recording this and hopefully airing it during a strike week, during kind of a global boycott. But this is just one little blip in a much larger, longer struggle that we are going to be facing our entire lifetimes in terms of ridding the world of colonialism and oppression and violence. And there's the saying, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Don't kill yourself in the moment and then burn yourself out for activism forever. Take baby steps. Think about the long haul. What are changes that you can make? What are things that you can do now that are going to be sustainable? Things that you can do in your daily life that will be sustainable in the long run so that we can ultimately make a difference as a whole community. I think that's an important takeaway from all this.
Yes. And with that, we conclude this episode. Thank you so much for listening to each and every single one of you. If you made through it all, or if you're reading the transcript, we thank you as well. Thank you for listening to this very long podcast about this. This has been weighing on Kate and I's mind for quite a while now.
Yeah, long time.
And I think with the censorship that we are facing as individuals and just in a public university, despite that, we still want to say something. And it's important to us.
Yeah.
So thank you for listening. Please take care of yourselves. Please continue resisting. And have a wonderful day or night wherever you are. Goodbye.
Bye.